Desperately seeking solutions for your child's sleep problems? Want to make an immediate change that can help improve things starting tonight? Well, you are in the right place. Let's jump in. I'm going to teach you a simple yet transformational change that can significantly improve your evenings and your child's sleep. The key to improving your child's sleep is surprisingly straightforward, yet it can make a real substantial difference. Now, what I'm going to teach you today is not a cure-all for all of your sleep problems, but this one simple change can really go a long way to making bedtime more manageable and help your child sleep longer at night. Are you ready for the secret? It's about adjusting the time that you put your child to bed. See, lots of toddlers and preschoolers are habitually going to bed too late. It is a widespread problem, and it's stemming from a few different reasons. One reason is the misconception that once kids are like 3 or 4 years old, they can all of a sudden handle a later bedtime like 8:30 or 9 o'clock. Another reason is busy evening schedules or even just the desire for kids to spend more time with parents in the evening. And lastly, this is probably the most common reason, just good old-fashioned stall tactics. So as your kids get older, even if you try to put them down at a reasonable time, they can get really creative with their stall tactics, and that can keep them up well past their ideal bedtime. So these are just a few reasons why bedtime starts to creep later as our kids get older. However, putting your child to bed too late has lots of detrimental effects. When kids stay up too late past their bedtime, you often see them getting a surge of energy. They get kind of like a second wind. And this is triggered by a rise in their cortisol levels. And when they have this second wind feeling, when they get this kind of hyperactivity going, it's really hard for them to settle down and fall asleep at a reasonable time. But additionally, this cortisol spike can really impact the quality of their sleep, and it can even cause overnight wake-ups, and it can cause your child to wake up really early in the morning, like around 5 o'clock. You might have even noticed this energy spike in your own child. So maybe it's after dinner or during the bath or even during the bedtime routine where they kind of seem to get like a jolt of energy, like kind of out of nowhere, and you start to wonder, okay, well, they must not be tired yet. But actually, this jolt of energy is actually a sign of extreme tiredness. It's what we call overtiredness. Therefore, the goal is to get your child to bed before that energy spike happens. So the right bedtime is crucial for peaceful evenings and good quality sleep. That's why I call it the magic of the early bedtime. So how do you figure out when the right magic bedtime is for your child? Obviously, there's lots of things to consider, like the age of the child, how well they typically sleep through the night, whether or not they're still taking a nap. But here are some good general guidelines for kids who are 3 to 6 years old. Kids under 6 years old should be asleep by 8 p.m. And it typically takes kids anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes to fall asleep after lights out. So your goal should be to be done with the bedtime routine by 7:45 at the latest. Now I want you to observe your child closely for signs of sleepiness in the evening to help you figure out when the right bedtime should be. And these signs can be subtle. So it could be anything like your child kind of just getting quieter than they normally are, or they're not interested in playing with their toys or not interested in playing with you. Maybe they just kind of are zoning out, kind of spacing out. Maybe you see them get a little bit fussy. Maybe you see them starting to lay down or use, kind of lazy body postures. And like I said, these can be subtle, so you really need to watch your kid closely. Now, if you have the type of kid that tends to get really hyper in the evening, like I was describing a minute ago, then what you need to do is look for these signs of sleepiness before that hyperness hits. So let's say you typically see that your kid gets hyper around 7:30. Well, then start watching them really closely at 6:30 to see if you can find some of these subtle signs of sleepiness. So as you're looking for these signs of sleepiness, once you start to see the first signs, even if they're very subtle, that is the ideal bedtime for your child. So for kids 3 to 6 years old, the ideal bedtime is going to be anywhere between 6:30 and 7:45. And again, the goal is to have your child asleep by 8 p.m. Now, you may be surprised at how early in the evening you start to see these sleepy signs now that you know exactly what you're looking for. But if you've got a child who's been going to bed late, 9 o'clock or later, it's likely that their body's gotten very overtired. So you might see these signs very early in the evening. It's likely that they need a much earlier bedtime than what you've been doing. Let's say that your child just always seems hyper. They're like the Energizer Bunny. They're just going, going, going. And you're thinking, Jessica, like I've watched this kid like a hawk and they don't show any signs of tiredness. What am I supposed to do? So in that case, see if there is any point in the night where the hyperness gets even more extreme. Or maybe they even get hyper, but they're super fussy or they're super combative. If you can find a time where that peak kind of happens, let's say that's at like 7:30, then move bedtime 15 minutes earlier from that point and give that a shot. And if you really can't see any changes in behavior at all, then the best thing to do is use the time ranges that I've given you here today. Pick a bedtime earlier than what you've been doing and just get started. Just get started experimenting. Okay, so now that you've picked a new earlier bedtime, there's two things that I want you to do. First of all, be consistent. You need to stick with this new bedtime for at least 5 days in order to really see a change. Now, the kind of changes that you're looking for are really anything positive related to sleep. So maybe they're fighting you less at bedtime. Maybe they have a quicker onset of sleep, meaning they're falling asleep more quickly after bedtime, after the bedtime routine is over. Maybe they're sleeping more consistently through the night, and maybe they're waking up later in the morning. Number 2, I want you to keep a sleep log. So days are long, and I promise you are not going to remember what happened 3 nights ago. I want you to just write down a few things each night. So I want you to write down what time bedtime was, what time you actually got lights out, how long it took your kid to fall asleep, how they slept through the night, and then what time they woke up in the morning. And keep in mind that progress might happen slowly. So let's say it's taking your kid 40 minutes to fall asleep, and then after a few nights of a new bedtime, it's taking them 30 minutes to fall asleep. Well, even though that's only a small change, that is a sign that you're on the right track and you should stick with this new earlier bedtime even longer. Okay, so how do you know once you've found the perfect bedtime? There's a couple things. First off, if your child is falling asleep within 5 to 20 minutes of lights out, that's a very good sign. And the second piece is if they're sleeping until at least 6 o'clock in the morning. If you've got those two things going for you, then you know that you have found the right bedtime. For more details on the magic of the early bedtime, I've put together a free resource for you. So check the show notes to find the link and then you can download your copy.